This recording is going to cover the instructions for cloud sculpting. What this does is recognize that in many clouds in a picture, a great deal of the information is in that mid-range so that it isn't extremely dark or light, but it has that average brightness. And that's where the refining of detail helps. And we have a very effective way to do that working within Vivesa of Nik software. So I'm going to start out by coming into today's material and do a file, open. There's a cloud sculpting folder. In it, there are lots of good examples. I'm going to go into Sean Bagshaw, and I have a link so that you can look at his way of dealing with this. And if you go out and follow that internet video, you'll want to use the JPEG that you find there, and that will match what he's teaching. But for our purposes, I will go and use a different image. And I'm going to open the two in here that are PSD files. They're Tanzania clouds developed and another one of Tanzania clouds. So I'm going to select the two PSD files. There are two images here. I want to look at one at a time, so I'm going to go to the window menu and under images and consolidate them to tabs. Your computer may have done that automatically. But I want to show you these two to start because I've done the work on them and you'll have a chance to see what a difference it makes. So I'm opening my layers panel so you can see there are lots of layers here. I'm going to undo all the work by going to the background layer to the eyeball, holding down the Alt or Option key. I'm going to click that eyeball and it will turn off all the layers above. I wanted you to see that before I did my cloud sculpting, I did some work on these clouds. I have two burn and dodge layers in which I painted parts of those clouds a little darker and parts a little lighter because I thought it would improve the scene there. And these isn't necessary, but I wanted you to see. The first layer above the background, if you'll look at it, you'll see that it's painted with dark, which means I darkened part of that image on a 50% gray layer. So I'm going to remove that check mark and show that up. And to see the difference, go back and forth. Hide it and show it. I just brought a little more contrast to those clouds to start with. Go up to the next one, which is turned off, and you'll see the painting was white. So this will actually lighten part of the sky. So let's look at it and put it back. These were just things I happened to do on this. And the reason I thought it's worth showing it to you is that if I want to go and work with Nik software and the last layer I worked on is either a dodge and burn layer or if it might be an adjustment layer. But in any case, the top layer is not a layer that has any pixels. You can't work directly by going into Nik software. You have to bring back the pixels. So what I did here was I created a new background layer with all of the adjustments that have been made so far. If you've been working with me, you know this is the one where you need so many fingers that if you hold down, everybody holds the shift, and then Windows holds control while Mac holds command, and then everybody adds the Alt or Option key. So you have three keys with your left hand. You then type the letter E, and it will produce a new background with all of the work on it. So I'm going to reveal that next layer, layer 1. And it will show you the work that has been done, but it shows it to you on a layer of pixels. Once you have a pixel layer, you can go into Vivesa. So before we do that, I want you to see what Vivesa did. I basically wanted to add contrast to the midtones in the clouds. So if you will just undo the top, reveal the top layer and hide it. You can see how it looks very natural, but the clouds deserve attention. And in this picture, there's enough clouds that they need to have something worth looking at. But what's equally important is that I did not change the foreground or the trees. They were fine. I didn't need to change them. As you go back now, we're going to turn off all the layers and turn them back on by going to the background layer and holding the Alt or Option key. And as you do it, I want you to notice that you don't see changes in the foreground. You see it? The only changes have occurred in the clouds. This is one of the reasons why cloud sculpting as done in Vivesa is a very useful technique. Incidentally, as far as I can tell, the word cloud sculpting came from Shaw Bagshaw. And I pointed out to you, I gave you a video and an image to follow Sean Bagshaw as he does things and works on them. But we're going to do some very simple ones ourselves. Before we go back and start over, let's go to the other image we opened. It's the Tanzania one, the clouds developed. And again, you see the same procedure. I worked a little on the clouds just with burning and dodging layers. And so I'm going to go back to the first background and I'm going to hold the Alt or the Option key and turn off all the adjustments. This is how this image looked after I had done my basic work on it. And I looked at those clouds and I thought, they're quite important in this scene and I'd like to give them more definition. So the first thing I did, and you don't always need this, I decided to improve the contrast in the clouds by going in to burning and dodging. The first layer I painted with some black, so if you reveal that next layer and hide it and reveal it, you can see how I went in some of the little darker areas I enhanced. Okay? It actually is sort of like our haze removal that we do in images. But this was done before we had haze removal as an option. So it's another way. It's possible that if you'd gone in and done haze removal on the background, it would have gotten the same effect of those two burn and dodge layers. But let's go now. The next burn and dodge layer is dodging with white. Reveal it, hide it. Very delicate. Can you see that some of the darkest areas were painted in white a little? And they may not have been necessary, but I wanted you to, since they're here, the important thing for our teaching is to learn. If you've done anything on an image and the top layer in the layers panel is not made up of pixels, you're going to need to create a pixel layer before you use Nik software. So what I did in layer 1 there was that fancy thing, you know, with Shift key and either Control or Command and either Alt or Option, and the letter E produces the next layer and you may reveal it. The only difference is it's got pixels on it. Nik software has to work on pixels, not on adjustment layers. And so once I did that, I went into Vivesa and I did some work and I want you to see the results. So reveal the top layer and then hide it several times. And notice what that does to the clouds. Those clouds weren't adding anything to that picture. Adding that detail in the clouds doesn't detract from my foreground, but you realize we have just about as much sky in this image as I have foreground. They need to both contribute to the final image. And so we're going to take a look at how that cloud sculpting was done. So what I'd like you to do is to just hide that Vivesa layer. And when we do that, we can recreate it so you see how it's done. So again, we're starting with a layer that has pixels. And you're going up to the filter menu. Oh, you know, it doesn't like that hidden layer. So you're not going to lose what you saved. Let's just reveal and delete the top layer. The one that says Vivesa 2, go up to Layer, Delete Layer. Now you've got a workable image where the top layer in the stack is a pixel layer. Now you can go into Filter, come to Nik Software, and come down to Vivesa 2. This is, I consider, one of the most valuable parts of the Nik collection. And you can do so many things with it. So click on Vivesa 2, and this image will open up in that software. And we now are going to try to work on just the clouds. I'm going to decide that at this point I'm not worried about the rest, but I want to show you what you can do with clouds. Well, in order to do the clouds and not do the rest of the image, we can't be applying global adjustments. Take a look at the right side of your screen. Can you see that these controls are all set to global? If I move any of those sliders, everything in the image will change. So I need to use control points, which I consider one of the greatest additions that we get through this Nik software. Hold the control point, pick it up, come over to the clouds, and the clouds are pretty much divided by that tree in the middle. So I'm going to work on the left side of the clouds, and I'm going to adjust the size of the circle to include the left side. And when I do that, for my own satisfaction, I need to know, what have I selected? So I will scroll on this panel down till I see the control point list. And we have one control point which we selected. And I wonder, what did it actually pick up? What's going to change? Well, on the control point on the right side, you have a square black. And if you click it, it shows you your selection. Look how effectively it eliminated the bush in the foreground. And that's because in Nik software, control points look at tonality and texture, and where you click will affect the selection. To prove it, while it looks like this, grab the point and move it. You see, depending on where you click is what's going to change. So I'm putting it sort of in the middle where all the clouds are affected. And of course, the way it works, because it fades out at the edges, you'll never see an abrupt change from where you did work on a control point and where you didn't. It'll blend in beautifully. And I'm telling you that you can do this because when you're done, we're going to take the same adjustment, copy it, and put it over on the right side. So right now, this is where we're working, and I would like to see my picture again. So I go over to the control point list, and I uncheck that right box. I get the picture back. Now I'm going to go up here, and I've told you, some of you before, that you can either work the little tiny sliders that are on your picture, or you can use them over here. Because notice that what said global before now says selective. They're tied to the active control point. And the way I add that mid-tone contrast is with structure. So I'm going to grab this midpoint and raise it to the right and watch the structure come in. As you're adjusting this and putting in structure, you should have in the back of your mind that if you overdo it, it's going to be on its own layer, and you can pull back on the opacity of that layer. So don't be afraid to make a fairly strong adjustment. You can always back off. So I get what I think looks fine at this point. And now I want to copy this point and put it over on the right side. So while I'm looking at it, I come over here where the point is. And if I hold down the Alt or Option key, I will get a copy of that point. So hold the Alt or Option, take that point and drag it over to the right, and notice the effect it has on that section. Okay? And if you wonder what is selected, come back to your control point list. You have a new one. Select the black box, and you'll see what you've added to that. If you want to add more to it, you can take this little and drag it out a little. You see how it stretches that over a bit? Because I wasn't working much in the tree, I'd like to reach the tree. Can you see the magic that you're not working on the foreground of the image? You're not even working on the wood in the tree, because what you had really didn't affect that so much. So once I've decided the selection is correct, I come down to the list and uncheck that little black box so I see my image. And now I want to work from this easy to read control panel. And guess what? It says selective. And what is it selected to? The active control point. And you know, it's already been set in the structure because we just copied it. So I don't need to do any more. If for some reason one side needed more adjustment than the other, once I've copied them, I can go back and make adjustments on either. But in this case, I did what I wanted. I adjusted both sides of the clouds. So what I'm going to do is not make any further adjustments. If I click in the gray area around my image, all those nasty sliders will disappear. And if you want to see the before and after of what you did in Vivesa 2, go to the top where you see preview, uncheck it, and check it back. Do that several times. And if you were thinking, oh, I think I overdid it, don't try to change it here. Just plan to lower the opacity later. And as I've told people, I teach this, I never work with their brush adjustment. I work with OK to leave here and go back into the editor of my software. So I say OK. I now have a Vivesa layer on top. I can test it out, hiding it and bringing it back. If for some reason I think it's overdone, this is how I can change the power of the adjustment. I go to the opacity slider and I grab the word opacity, hold the mouse button and drag to the left and I lower the opacity. So if I think it's a little overdone, I can bring it down whatever I need. So don't worry about whether you're a little overdone when you make the original adjustment. It's much easier to bring it down than to have to go back and redo it if it's too weak. So it's a wonderful way to make the clouds in your image are worthy of being in the picture. So we've restored that Vivesa. Let's go to the other image, which has its Vivesa 2 layer, and let's delete that layer so we can recreate it. Vivesa 2, I'm going to go to Layer, Delete Layer, say yes. Now I have it ready to receive Vivesa 2. And you remember, the top layer has to be a pixel layer, and we already created that. So we're going to go up to Filter, Nik Collection, Vivesa 2, and you're back where you were with the other one. And again, I would like to work on the clouds. And in this case, I'm wondering if I can do the clouds with one control point. I don't have anything horribly disrupting, so let's find out. Go up and grab a control point and put it somewhere toward the middle up above in the clouds. Remember, it's reading what is texture and tonality is under this point. Click. Stretch it out to make it big enough to cover the sky. Now, come down to your list of control points and use that black square to find out what you selected. And when you do, it shows you your selection. Look how beautifully it avoided the foreground in the tree. And if you wonder if you've gotten the right spot, you can grab the control point and move it. And notice what happens when you move it. Oh, it's quite dramatic, isn't it? You can move it around and get what you think you'd like. I like it here because I want to see a lot of adjustment in the image. So I'll leave it there. And now I want to bring back my image. So I go back to my control point and uncheck the right box. And I'm going to come up to the top where I can see those control point sliders. Notice it's in selective mode because you have made a control point. Grab structure, drag it to the right, and look what it does to the clouds. When you get to a point you think you like, test the preview button. And if you want more, you can add more. If you want less, you can add less. But keep in mind, it's better to have a little too much and then reduce it later than to be stuck with an image where you didn't do enough. So having done that, I am going to go and we come out through the OK button. And now I have the Vivesa 2 layer. which I can turn off with the eyeball and turn on. Look how much better the image is when the sky has more merit. You know, when you have an image and the sky is an important part of it, you have to be sure it carries its own weight and that it adds to the image just as any other part does. And of course, it's important to realize that we did not change the foreground. Now, if I wanted to work on the foreground, I could have placed a control point in the foreground and done something else while I was in Vivesa. This point was to show you just working with cloud sculpting. But at the same time that I sculpt those clouds, I could have added a control point to the foreground and maybe warmed it up a bit if I think it needed a little warmth, or I could have added a little tonality, whatever I wish. But you've done this part of it. And with this much explanation, you can go in and try other ones and see how well you do. I've given you quite a few examples to work on cloud sculpting.